we are losing the war in Ukraine, which should have made people understand by now this is not a war between Russia and Ukraine. This is a war between Russia and its allies, mostly known as the BRICS nations, and the United States and its allies, mostly known as the G7. In that war, Russia has moved and taken over, in effect, about a third of the country. It is far west of where its former border with Ukraine was, and it's therefore crystal clear who's winning and who's losing. And the destruction of the Ukrainian economy and of many of its cities and railroads and energy system are all testimony to that reality. The corresponding damage on the Russian side is inconsequential. That is a reality. And coming after the American loss of the war in Vietnam and loss of the war in Afghanistan and loss of the war in Iraq, the handwriting is surely on the wall. I would also say that the reality of all of this, while still not clear in the minds of the American people, is lurking just below the surface. So, for example, Americans have become aware that the real competitor of the United States, and it's a competitor in the economic sense for the first time in a century that could be and has been called the American century, because the American empire replaced the British Empire, which could make that claim for the 19th and part of the 20th century. It became clear that China was the new competitor. China, at the beginning of the year, had an alliance with 4 other countries, the 5 countries making up the BRICS: Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. By the end of the year, 6 other nations had formally joined the BRICS, and another 10 to 20 have indicated their desire and intention to do so. This makes the BRICS a global bloc, a part of the world economy, allied together. And if you do the arithmetic, which economists like me do, you will know not only is the BRICS taken together now well over 50% of the people on this planet, but they already, if you add them up, have a larger GDP, gross domestic product, a rough measure of the total output of goods and services in a year, that is already significantly higher than that of the United States and its G7 allies: Britain, France, Germany, Italy, Canada, and Japan. So the harsh reality is we are living through and slowly becoming conscious of the decline, relatively speaking, of the American empire and the rise of, 2024 doesn't yet allow us to say what's coming next. Could it be a Chinese empire? Clearly, if past is prologue, it may well be. But it's also possible that the Chinese mean it when they say they seek a multipolar world, not another empire. And at least for the moment, it isn't clear whether they can achieve that goal or even whether it is altogether their goal. But for the United States, we are in extraordinary difficulty. Lastly, one of the signs of such difficulty is a level of desperate, incoherent political leadership and policies. The election of Mr. Trump is one symptom of the decline of this empire. So too is the attack on allies who are being browbeaten on the grounds that they're not contributing more to the alliance because the United States can't afford to do what it has been doing and doesn't know how to fix the situation. The intense scapegoating inside the United States of immigrants, of the Chinese, and of a random collection of other demonized others. These are signs of decline. In the 19th and 20th centuries, when the American economy and empire were growing, it invited, it welcomed, and it productively integrated waves of immigrants, huge waves of immigrants. The scapegoating instead, the promised deportation of millions that Mr. Trump has promised, are not the sign of a problem with immigrants. It's a sign that the United States economy is not growing, cannot absorb what it once used as a means to its own advantage and growth. That's a sign of weakness. And so too is the end of a commitment to neoliberal globalization, free trade, and all of that. Just as happened in the British Empire, free trade is no longer advantageous. So it's going to be unfree trade, or what is more politely termed protectionism. And the United States, especially under Mr. Trump, but there was no big difference here from Mr. Biden either, is becoming nationalist and protectionist. It cannot operate a global economy anymore. Only gestures are left for that, while the reality is a turning inward, and in the name of isolating its enemies, what you have is the United States isolating itself.